All right, welcome back to another Tweet Tuesday. In this video, we're going to talk about personal development and changing parts of who you are, because that is literally the entire premise of personal development and self-improvement. So I'm just going to jump in and read the tweet. Sometimes personal development can feel like taking a hammer to the glass statue that is your identity. The secret is to realize that you can keep some of the old pieces when rebuilding. You don't have to change everything. So the story behind this is twofold. The first part is, at some point in my personal development, self-improvement journey, I kind of realized that everything felt very, very overwhelming, and I felt really lost, because when you get to a certain point in self-improvement, personal development, whatever you want to call it, you start being able to really realize all your faults and all of your flaws. You're like, I don't like this about myself. I want to change this, and this. There's just so much wrong with who you are, you know? And at some point, it just felt like you just don't know who you are anymore. Like, that's what it felt like for me. I'm like, who am I? There's so many things that I want to change. There's so many things that I could change. Who am I really if I change all these things? So that's part one. And then part two was, I was watching a stream by Disguised Toast. If you don't know him, he's a content creator. And he said on stream, he was like, you know, I have a very arrogant, dark humor vibe. I think he was in the middle of getting quote unquote canceled on Twitter, you know, but he also called himself out. So anyways, you can look up the drama if you want. I'll put a link down in the description. But he was talking about this whole drama situation, and he was like, I am definitely arrogant, and I have this edgy, dark humor, and I don't think I want to change that about myself. I like that about myself. And that made me realize, in this whole space of personal development and self-improvement, you don't need to change all of who you are. In fact, it's almost beneficial not to, because if you do, then who are you really? Like, there's core pieces of you, and there's certain things that you can change and probably should change. At least it was for me. But there's other parts of you that make you who you really are. And it's going to be up to you to really decide what you want to change and what you don't. And I can throw down a couple examples here to kind of illustrate this a little bit. But the question that you should ask yourself is, does this part serve me? Like, is there a good reason to keep this part, which is kind of a more logical way of thinking about it? And then a more like emotional way of thinking about it is, do you like it? Like, do you just like this part of who you are? So I'll throw down two examples. I mentioned arrogance. Disguised Toast said it. I can agree with it as well. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes in my life, in my day, I just think I'm better than everyone else. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be real with you. And someone might look at that and say, well, arrogance isn't good, it's bad because of blah blah blah, right? You can come off as like suck up, blah blah blah. But I quite like that part of me, and as long as it serves me, which in this case it does, there are times when I'm not feeling confident or I'm not really sure of what I'm doing, and then I just remind myself of the stuff I've done in the past, and you're almost hyping yourself up. You're like, yeah, you know what? If there's anyone that can do this, it's me, because I'm the fucking best. So that's one part. I'm like, I probably have a big ego, and I don't think I want to change that. I want to understand the extent of what that is, and I want to make sure that it doesn't negatively affect my life, but I don't want to change it, at least not completely. And before I move on to the second example, that's another thing to note is that change is a spectrum. With the analogy that I used earlier, you know, like smashing a glass statue and you're just left with all these pieces and you're just like, what parts do I keep? It's not 100% like that. It can definitely feel like that, but it's not 100% like that, because change is a spectrum. If there's something that's a part of who you are that you want to change, you don't need to change it completely. So that's an aside. The second example that I'll give you, and I think a lot of guys can relate to this, is that I am really logical, like very, very, very logical. So logical that I feel like I don't fully understand and grasp emotions, because I kind of like wrap emotions in like a layer of logic to understand it. At least that's how I perceive the world. And I've thought about changing this, but I am like, no, I actually quite like this, because it's how I grew up. It's how I've learned to view the world. Not only would it take a long time to change, but it is very, very beneficial because it helps me logically deconstruct abstract concepts to be able to do stuff like explain it to someone who might not think the way I do, or to be able to teach someone, or to be able to structure it in like a video, which I don't think I need to tell you how that's useful for YouTube. So those are two quick examples, and the entire thing, the entire message that I want to deliver across in this video is if you're really into personal development and self-improvement, and you've identified things that you want to change about yourself, this is just a reminder that you don't need to change everything. You can choose parts of yourself to keep. You can choose parts of yourself to really understand and minimize the negative impacts of, so it doesn't affect other people negatively and you negatively in the future. But there are parts of you that are okay. You can learn to accept those parts and accept who you are, and you don't need to change everything. And if it feels overwhelming in the beginning, just choose a couple things to really focus on. And how you do that, this is like priority, we're going into priority here, but how you choose that is you just figure out what parts of you that you want to change affect your life the most right now, negatively. So make a list, go through it one at a time. You don't need to change everything, and don't forget who you are. I'll end off the video on that note. As always, I hope you learned something, and I will see you around in the next one. Peace.